Montana Territory, July 1873. The sound of the auction bell cracked through the dry air like a gunshot, and Brielle Vance felt her stomach turn. She stood barefoot on the wooden platform of the Miles City Livestock Fairgrounds, wrists bound in front of her, sun beating down on her scalp. Dust clung to the hem of her faded dress. Her husband had sold her, just like he had sold his last lame horse, only this time the excuse was that she could not bear children. "Infertile," he'd said, loud enough for the saloon men to hear. "What good is a wife who can't give you a legacy?" She stared out at the cluster of men gathered. Most watched her like she was nothing more than a mule with a bad leg. One even spat on the ground and turned away. Her breath caught in her throat, but then she saw him. A tall man stood apart from the rest, arms crossed, dark shirt dusted with trail dirt. His face was all angle, strong jaw, high cheekbones, but it was his eyes that made her look twice. They were steady, serious, almost kind. $2. One man barked from the crowd. "3," another said, laughing. Then the tall man stepped forward. "10," he said, voice low and even. The auctioneer blinked. "10." The tall man tossed a coin purse onto the table. "Let her come with me. She ain't livestock." The crowd murmured, but no one else bid. Brielle watched him. He did not look at her like she was broken, or like she was less. He just nodded once, slow and sure, and she felt something shift deep inside her chest. The auctioneer hesitated, but greed won out. "Sold." She was untied. No one spoke a word. The tall man walked toward her, his long strides calm and quiet. When he reached her, he took off his hat. "I am Sawyer Thorne," he said. "You all right?" She stared at him, unsure what to say. Her mouth opened, then closed. "I am not going to hurt you," he added. "You can ride with me or not at all. But I will not leave you here." She nodded, heart pounding. "Brielle," she said softly. "Vance." Sawyer helped her up onto his gelding like she was made of glass. Then he climbed up behind her and turned the horse west, toward the distant mountains. They rode in silence for hours. The sky turned from copper to violet. He stopped by a creek near a grove of cottonwoods and built a fire. She sat across from him, arms wrapped tight around her knees. "You have a place?" she asked. "I have a homestead near the Yellowstone River. 40 acres. A cabin. 2 horses. A boy and a girl." Brielle blinked. "You have children?" "I do. Twins. They are 7. Their mother died giving birth. Been just me and them since." Her throat tightened. "Where are they now?" "With my neighbor. Woman named Elsie. Keeps them fed if I am out driving cattle." She nodded, eyes fixed on the fire. "I did not buy you," he said suddenly, voice low. "I only paid to get you out of there. You can stay until you figure out what is next. Or not. That choice is yours." Brielle looked up at him. He was watching the flames, jaw flexing like he hated saying so many words. She saw how tired he looked, how much weight he carried behind his eyes. "I do not need deciding time," she said. "I have nowhere else." He gave a small nod. "Then come with me." They rode the next morning until the land turned soft and green again. The cabin sat nestled between 2 hills, with a barn, a corral, and a clothesline swaying in the breeze. As they approached, 2 small figures burst out from behind the cabin, 1 boy, 1 girl, same dark hair, same curious eyes. "Papa!" the girl shouted. The boy stopped short when he saw Brielle. Sawyer dismounted and lifted his daughter into his arms. "This is Tessa," he said, then looked to the boy. "And that is Tobias." Brielle slid off the horse, unsure where to put her hands. Tessa stared up at her, then whispered something in Sawyer's ear. He smiled faintly. "She asked if you were going to stay." Brielle glanced at him, then at the children. If that is all right, she said. Tobias frowned. Are you going to be mean? No, Brielle said, kneeling to meet his eyes. I do not know how to be mean. He studied her a second longer, then nodded like he had made some great decision. Then you can stay. That night, she sat at the table with them. Sawyer carved meat, Tessa passed cornbread, and Tobias told a long story about catching a frog the size of a shoe. Brielle laughed, real and warm. She had not laughed in a long time. Later, after the children were tucked into bed, she walked out onto the porch. The stars spread wide overhead. Sawyer stood there, arms folded, watching the sky. I do not understand you, she said. He looked at her. Most people do not. You do not know me. And yet you brought me here. You looked like someone who needed someone. She swallowed. You are not afraid I will bring trouble? I have seen trouble, he said. You are not it. They stood in silence. The breeze carried the scent of pine and wood smoke. Then softly, she said, My husband said I was broken. That no man would want a woman who could not give him children. Sawyer turned to face her fully. You are not broken, Brielle, he said. You are alive. That is enough. Her eyes filled. She did not look away. You are kind. He shook his head. I am just trying to make it through. Same as you. She reached out then, without thinking, and touched his hand. He did not move away. It was not love yet, but it was something. A beginning. And for the first time in a long time, Brielle Vance felt the stirrings of hope. Brielle rose before the sun, raw-eyed but steady. The quilt Sawyer had left on the cot smelled faintly of cedar, and the cabin walls creaked with the first stirrings of wind. She moved quietly, careful not to wake the children. The floorboards were cool beneath her feet as she stepped into the kitchen and found a tin basin half filled with water from the pump. She washed her face and tied her hair back with a strip of fabric torn from her old hem. Outside, the yard was still silver with morning. A hawk circled above the far ridge. She stepped off the porch and moved toward the henhouse. By the time Sawyer returned from checking the west fence line, she had collected 5 eggs, swept the cabin floor, and coaxed Tessa into brushing her hair with a carved comb she found in the back of a drawer. He dismounted and handed her a small burlap sack. Dried apples from Elsie, he said. She sent word she's keeping the children tomorrow, so I can haul lumber from town. Brielle took the sack, surprised. Why would she do that? She's always looking for excuses to stay useful. Lost her husband in the first Sioux War. Keeps busy tending others. She nodded, fingers tightening around the sack. I could go with you. Help carry. She's got an extra mule cart. But the road's rough past the Cottonwood Bend. I can handle rough, she said. He studied her for a long breath. All right then. That evening, after dinner, Brielle sat by the hearth, stitching a torn hem on Tobias's shirt. The fabric was stiff with old soap, and the thread tugged hard. Sawyer leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her work. You sew like someone who's done it for others, he said. She didn't look up. My father was a wheelwright. My mother kept books for a boarding house. I learned to patch clothes faster than I learned to read. You miss them? They died in the fever that swept through Lawrence. I was 13. Got passed around after that. He was quiet for a moment. What made you marry him? She set the shirt down slowly. He had a kind mouth, and he didn't drink then. I thought quiet meant gentle. Sometimes quiet just means waiting, he said. Brielle folded the shirt carefully. He stopped seeing me the day I told him I'd lost our second baby. After that, he kept saying I wasn't whole, like I'd misplaced some part of myself. You didn't, Sawyer said, voice low. She met his eyes. You don't know that. I don't have to, he said, stepping forward. You're here and you're steady and you show up for people. That's whole enough. Her throat tightened. "You're not what I expected." "I rarely am." As she stood to put the mended shirt away, Tessa's voice called out from the loft. "Papa!" Sawyer turned toward the ladder. "What is it?" "There's something under my bed." He glanced at Brielle, then climbed up the rungs. A moment later, his voice came back down. "Just a cricket. Wants to share your blanket." Tessa giggled, and Sawyer's footsteps creaked back down the ladder. "She's got your humor," Brielle said. He raised a brow. "She's got her own. I just try not to get in the way of it." Later, when the fire burned low and the children had drifted into sleep, Brielle lingered near the door. The moonlight slanted across the yard, catching the edge of the water barrel. Her fingers played absently with the edge of her sleeve. "Do you want the cot another night?" Sawyer asked behind her. "Or I can set you up in the lean-to. It's dry, and the roof's sound." She turned. "I'd rather not sleep alone, if that's all right. Not for anything untoward. Just quiet's harder some nights." He nodded, solemn. "You can take the bed. I'll take the floor." "That's not fair." "Fairness doesn't matter much. Comfort does." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "We could share." He looked at her, not startled, just searching. "I mean sleep," she added. "Nothing more." "Not yet." He held her gaze. "All right." They lay side by side that night, neither reaching, neither retreating. The space between them was warm but careful. She listened to the rhythm of his breath and, for the first time in years, hers began to match it. Somewhere in the dark, a promise was taking shape, though neither of them spoke it. Morning would come, and with it something new. Brielle braced her hand against the jolting cart as it climbed the rutted slope beyond the cottonwood bend. The mule, gray and stubborn-eyed, pulled steady under Sawyer's voice low, sure, never raised. He guided the reins with one hand, the other resting on his knee. The sun had crested, heat settling over the land in a still hush broken only by the creak of wheels and the occasional flap of canvas. "Elsie said the sawmill's backed up," Sawyer said, eyes on the narrow road. "We'll be lucky to get the full order by dusk." "I don't mind waiting," Brielle answered, brushing dust from her skirt. "I like watching people work. You can tell more about them that way." He gave a thoughtful nod, but didn't speak further. They passed a stand of aspen, their pale leaves trembling in the dry wind. A crow lifted from a fence post ahead, wings flashing black against the sky. When they reached the mill on the edge of Custer's Fork, the foreman, a tall, tobacco-thin man with a singed sleeve and a voice like gravel, greeted Sawyer with a nod. Brielle climbed down and stepped aside, letting the men talk. She wandered toward the edge of the creek that fed the mill wheel. The water ran quick and clear along polished stones. She crouched, fingertips skimming the surface, and felt the cold bite of it. Her reflection wavered, cheeks browned by sun, mouth set in something close to calm. A woman she barely recognized. "You ever see water like that where you lived?" Sawyer's voice came behind her. She stood, brushing her hands on her apron. "Not since Kansas. There was a stream just past my mother's garden. We'd float apple peels down it like tiny boats." He stepped beside her, gaze fixed on the current. "My daughter does that with cottonwood leaves. Says they're messengers." "Maybe they are." He glanced down at her. "You think about sending word to anyone about where you are now?" "I don't have anyone left to tell." Her voice didn't break. It was just fact now. She looked out at the water again. "But if I did, I'd tell them I was safe. That I'm not scared anymore." Sawyer didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "That's something worth writing down." By mid-afternoon, they'd loaded what lumber the mill had ready: flatboards for the new stall roof, beams for the loft ladder that had started to sag. As Sawyer tied the last rope, a young boy ran up from the mill yard, barefoot and breathless. "Mr. Thorne, that old mare of yours Elsie says she's foaled." Sawyer turned quickly, nodding once. "Tell her we'll be there before sundown." The boy darted off, and Sawyer turned to Brielle, his face unreadable. "Did you know she was expecting?" she asked. "I had a feeling. That mare's older than most would chance breeding. But she'd taken to one of the neighbors' colts when they crossed pasture last spring. Guess nature found a way." They climbed back into the cart, the weight of lumber groaning behind them. As they rolled downhill, a gust of wind picked up powdery dirt from the road edge, swirling it around them. Brielle pulled the brim of her bonnet lower and glanced toward Sawyer. "You believe in signs?" she asked. He shrugged. "I believe in patterns. In things coming back around, if you wait long enough." She looked out across the fields, where wheatgrass bent in waves under the sky. "I used to think I'd never be allowed to start again," she said. "That whatever broken thing I carried would follow me everywhere." He didn't interrupt. "But lately," she continued, quieter now, "I've been thinking maybe it's not about starting over. Maybe it's just about standing still long enough to grow around the hurt." Sawyer's gaze didn't leave the road, but his voice was low and sure. "That's how trees do it. They don't forget the fire, but they keep growing bark around it, stronger than before." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It held something like knowing. When they reached the homestead again, dusk had stretched across the sky in long strips of gold and lavender. Elsie waited on the porch, arms folded and a grin tugging at the corners of her mouth. "She's a little thing," she said, as Sawyer helped Brielle down from the cart. "Red coat, white blaze, just like her sire." Tessa came bounding from the side yard, her braids bouncing. "Come see. She's got legs like stilts." Brielle followed them to the barn, where the mare stood quietly in the straw, her newborn foal pressed close. Tobias crouched nearby, whispering something Brielle couldn't hear. She watched him reach out slow, gentle, and touch the foal's shoulder. That night, with the children curled up on their pallets and the scent of fresh-cut hay drifting through the open window, Sawyer leaned his back against the headboard. Brielle sat beside him, legs tucked under the quilt. "Do you ever think about marrying again?" she asked, not looking at him. He considered a long moment. "I think about what it means to ask someone to share the weight of this life. Not just the good days." She turned toward him. "And if someone wanted to?" He met her eyes. "I'd want them to know I don't expect anything they can't give. That what matters to me is what we build together, not what's missing." Her heart thudded against her ribs. "I think I could build something again," she said, "if it was with someone who saw me for who I am, not what I'm not." He reached out slowly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Then maybe we start there." She leaned into his touch, and for the first time, she felt the ground beneath her finally hold. The first frost came early that year, crisping the grass before dawn and leaving brittle white lace along the window panes. Brielle stood at the stove, working a wooden spoon through a pot of cornmeal. She moved without thinking, now measured, certain. The rhythm of the homestead had begun to settle into her bones. Across the room, Sawyer was dressing the children for the day. Tessa squirmed as he adjusted her boots, while Tobias pulled a wool cap low over his ears. "You'll help me stack the last of the firewood when chores are done," Sawyer said. "We'll need it." Tobias nodded. "Can Brielle come too?" "If she wants," Sawyer said, glancing up. "You warm enough?" Brielle handed Tessa a small tin cup of milk. "I'm fine, but I noticed the barn doors pulling crooked. Might be time to fix that hinge." Sawyer's eyes held hers a moment. "I'll see to it." After the children were bundled off toward the neighbors for the morning, Elsie having offered again to keep them while Sawyer and Brielle prepared for the colder weeks ahead, the air between them grew quieter, but not strained. They walked the fence line together, checking for gaps. The grass had dulled to gold, the sky low and pale, as if winter were watching from just over the ridge. Brielle paused near the north post. "You ever think about leaving this place?" He crouched beside her, testing the wire for slack. "Not since I put the first rail down. My boots grew into this dirt. Even through the hard years? Especially then." He straightened. "It's not about ease. It's about belonging." She nodded, running her fingertips along the rough wood. "I never had a place that asked me to stay." "You have one now," he said. She looked up. "You mean that?" "I wouldn't have said it if I didn't." They kept walking. The wind pressed through the cottonwoods, dry and hollow. At the edge of the pasture, Sawyer slowed. "I need to ask you something." Brielle waited. "I've been thinking about the land up past the ridge. It's good soil, and I've got enough saved to fence it. If we work it together, it could feed more than just us." She studied his face. "Why now?" "I want something that's ours, not just mine with you in it." Her throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "Then we'd need seed come thaw. I've already written to a supplier in Bozeman. It'll take some riding to fetch it." She smiled. "You planned all this without asking if I'd stay?" "I had hope." That night, after the children were asleep and the hearth had burned down to coals, Brielle sat by the window, mending the corner of a quilt Elsie had given them. Sawyer pulled the chair beside her. "I got a letter today," he said. She glanced over. "From who?" "My sister. Lives near Helena." She'd heard word about what happened in Miles. Said someone from town had been talking. Brielle's fingers stilled. "What did she say?" "She asked if I'd lost my mind." He paused. "I told her no. I told her I found someone worth trusting." Brielle folded the quilt in her lap. "You mean that?" "I don't say things I don't mean." He turned toward her. "But I'll ask it plain. Would you stand beside me in front of a preacher?" Her breath caught, not from fear but from the weight of it, the solid truth in his voice. "I would," she said. "If you're sure." "I've been sure since the night you sat across from me and didn't try to hide who you were." She reached for his hand. "Then yes." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. The quiet held. When the morning came, it brought with it a stillness so complete. Even the birds held their song. The world had shifted in the night, not loudly, but fully. The frost had hardened into snow by the first week of December, laying a white hush across the land. Smoke curled steady from the cabin's chimney, and the horses huddled close under the lean-to, warm breath ghosting in the cold air. Inside, the walls held heat well. The seams of the logs chinked with clay and straw. Sawyer had packed in himself before the first flurries came. Brielle stood over the table, pressing her thumb into the seam of a worn ledger book. Elsie had passed it along the last time she visited, saying it had belonged to her late husband, who'd once kept track of mule sales and oats by hand. Now it catalogued seed orders, fence lengths, and a penciled list of items they'd need come planting season. She dipped the nib into the inkwell, then paused as Sawyer came in, brushing snow from his coat. "Tobias says the trapline caught something," he said, hanging his coat on the peg. "Rabbit, likely. He wants to skin it himself." She smiled faintly. "You'll let him?" "He's ready. I showed him how last winter. He'll remember." She closed the ledger. "I was thinking we should send a letter to your sister." He blinked, surprised. "You want to go see her?" "No, but she might want to see us. If she hears it from you, it'll sit easier. That we married. That I'm raising your children." He nodded slowly. "She's not cruel, just stubborn. She'll come around. I can write it if you'd like." "No," he said. "She should hear it straight from me." Brielle crossed the room and picked up a bundle from the rocking chair. Inside was a length of wool she'd been stitching into trousers for Tobias. She handed them to Sawyer. "You'll need to hem these." He's grown taller again. He held them up, then looked at her. "You see everything." "I try." There was a quiet pause, the kind that didn't press but gave space. "I've been thinking about the land," he said. "The new piece. We could build a second cabin." She tilted her head. "You want to live separate?" "No. I was thinking more for Elsie. She's been alone a long while. She watches the children without hesitation. Maybe she'd want something of her own again." Brielle's brow furrowed. "She'd never say so. Which is why it should be offered plainly. No charity, just shared ground." She nodded, the thought settling in. "You always think ahead. It's a habit from the lean years." Later that day, Brielle watched from the window as Tobias knelt in the snow beside the trapline, carefully working the rabbit free. Tessa stood beside him, holding the burlap sack open. They moved with a quiet understanding. No bickering, just rhythm. She turned away and gathered the last jar of preserved cabbage from the shelf. That night, after the children were asleep and the wind began to cry low under the eaves, Sawyer opened the box beneath the bed. He pulled out a small cloth pouch and handed it to Brielle. She untied the knot slowly. Inside was a simple band of gold, thin and smoothed by time. "It was my mother's," Sawyer said. "She had hands like yours, strong, but careful." Brielle looked at him, eyes catching the soft firelight. "You kept it all this time?" "I was waiting for a reason." She slid the ring onto her finger. It fit without resistance. "I don't need a preacher," she said, "or a church, or paper. This is enough." "I'll still send word to town," he said. "Make it known." "But I agree." They didn't light a lantern that night, just let the fire burn low as they lay beside each other. His hand found hers beneath the quilt and stayed there, warm and sure. By the time the snow deepened, the land had gone still. They spent their days in the rhythm of winter mending, tending, teaching, planning. Tobias learned to read maps. Tessa took to baking, her bread rising better each time. One morning, as the wind softened and the sun caught the edge of the ridge in gold, Brielle stood beside Sawyer on the porch, wrapped in a shawl she'd woven from leftover wool. "You think we'll have a good spring?" she asked. "I think we'll have a fair one," he said. "Which is more honest." She leaned into him. "I never thought life would look like this. Not for me." He rested his chin against her temple. "It does now, and it will tomorrow." Their first planting came late, after the thaw, when the ground softened enough to take seed. Together, they worked row by row, Sawyer carving the lines, Brielle dropping kernels, the children following with water pails. The land received them quietly. By midsummer, the new cabin stood sturdy on the far ridge, smoke curling from its chimney. Elsie had accepted the offer with a single nod and a quiet tear she tried to pretend was wind. That fall, they harvested enough corn and squash to trade for new boots and calico. The cellar filled, and the children grew into their limbs, surer with every passing week. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the river and lit the sky with violet and rose, Sawyer took Brielle's hand and led her down to the edge of the pasture. The foal, nearly grown now, grazed near the fence. "She was born the day you came here," Sawyer said. "I never told you, but I took that as a sign." "I didn't believe in signs then," Brielle said. "And now," she turned toward him, "now I believe in steady hands and quiet mornings, in good land, in children who know they're safe. I believe in you." He kissed her there by the fence, with the sound of the wind in the grass and the sky wide above them. They built a life not from what was lost, but from what they chose each day to keep. And in that keeping they found everything they needed.